There's a moment that happens in a remote viewing session, not always, but often enough to matter, where something arrives that you didn't put there. It's not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It's more like a flicker at the edge of attention, a texture or a temperature or a single word that surfaces without any obvious origin. And for just a second before the analytical mind wakes up and starts explaining it, you have the sense that you received something rather than produced it. That distinction, received versus produced, is what this entire module is about. Welcome to Module 3, Remote Viewing, Structured Non-Local Perception. You've done some real work to get here. Module 1 gave you the documented history, what 23 years of government-funded research established. Module 2 gave you the protocol, the 6-stage coordinate remote viewing structure that Ingo Swann spent years building, and your first direct experience of sitting down with a set of coordinates and attempting a session of your own. Module 3 is different. It goes inward. Most introductions to remote viewing treat the phenomenology, the felt, interior experience of a session, as secondary, optional. The feeling section you can skim past to get to the real technique. That's exactly backward. The ability to feel the difference between genuine signal and analytical overlay in real time, before feedback tells you what the target was, is not decoration on top of the skill. It is the skill. Without it, you are guessing in a structured way. With it, you are doing something qualitatively different. The Stargate program's most successful operatives, McMonigal, Pat Price, the others whose session records are now part of the public archive, weren't distinguished primarily by the protocol they followed. They were distinguished by a refined capacity to recognize what genuine signal felt like when it arrived, and to distinguish it from the mind's extraordinarily convincing confabulations. That capacity is trainable. It develops slowly through honest practice and careful attention, and what this module does is give you the vocabulary and the framework to begin developing it now, so that when it shows up in your practice sessions, you have something to recognize it with. Here's one of the things I find genuinely remarkable about the remote viewing research. Practitioners from completely different backgrounds, different institutions, different countries, different decades, people who had no shared script to follow, describe genuine signal in almost identical terms. That consistency is not what you'd expect from a purely psychological phenomenon shaped by suggestion or expectation. It's a data point worth sitting with. So, what do they say? Genuine signal arrives quietly. It doesn't force its way in. It presents as a subtle impression, a flicker of sensation, a brief visual fragment, a single word that surfaces without apparent origin. And then it simply waits and holds. Joseph McMonigal describes it in terms of temperature. Genuine signal tends to feel cooler, more detached, less personally invested than the warm, fluent, story-complete impressions that analytical overlay produces. The analytical mind generates content with forward momentum. Ideas follow from previous ideas. Pictures elaborate themselves. Narratives build towards satisfying conclusions. Signal doesn't do that. It arrives and stops. Here's the counterintuitive part, and this is worth really hearing. In remote viewing, confidence in an impression is often a warning sign, not a confirmation. The analytical mind produces confident, complete, narratively satisfying content. Genuine signal is typically tentative, fragmentary, and incomplete, which means that the impressions you're most likely to trust, the vivid ones, the complete ones, the ones that feel certain, are often the ones working against you. And the impressions you're most likely to dismiss, the quiet, the fragmentary, the slightly strange arrivals that don't build into a story, are often doing exactly the right thing. Practice corrects that instinct gradually, but knowing it in advance helps you watch for it now. Analytical overlay isn't a mistake. It's not a failure of discipline or focus. It's the mind doing what it has been trained to do across an entire lifetime, completing patterns. When a fragmentary sensory impression arrives, your mind reaches for the most likely explanation and presents it to consciousness with the felt certainty of direct perception. In ordinary life, this is a feature. You don't need to consciously perceive every quality of a chair to recognize it as a chair. The mind handles that integration automatically and quickly. The remote viewing context is unusual precisely because that same process becomes the primary obstacle. The CRV protocol's insistence on flagging rather than suppressing analytical overlay is designed to work with this tendency rather than fight it. When you write AOL factory in brackets and continue, you acknowledge what the analytical mind has offered without allowing it to take over the session. The AOL log is not a record of failure. It's a record of honest practice. Over time, you'll notice your own personal patterns. Swann observed that most viewers develop characteristic default associations, what he called the top 10 responses. Water signals produce ocean. Vertical height produces tower or building. Organic natural elements produce forest. These associations aren't random. they're drawn from your history and imagination. Knowing them makes them manageable. This module is built around one core practice, learning to attend to how an impression arrives, not only what it contains. The practice session for Module 3 asks you to work through a full CRV session while adding something specific. In the margin next to each impression, you'll make a brief note, received, uncertain, or AOL. Not a detailed analysis, just a first, honest instinct about the quality of each impression as it arrives. This will slow the session down. That's intentional. The goal here is not efficiency. It's the development of discrimination that makes all future sessions more accurate and more honest. Before you look at the target feedback, you'll write a half-page phenomenological account of the session. What felt received? What felt generated? Where did the analytical mind step in most forcefully? What was the texture of any dry periods? Anxious, peaceful, blank. Then you receive feedback and compare. That comparison between what you felt and what was actually there is where the real learning lives. And if you do this consistently across many sessions, you begin to build something genuinely useful, a map of your own signal quality, what genuine perception feels like for you specifically, where your analytical overlay patterns run deepest. No one else can build that map for you. If you sat down with those coordinates in Module 2 and felt like nothing arrived, or like everything that did arrive felt manufactured, unconvincing, impossible to trust, I want to say something directly. You're not failing. You're exactly where every serious practitioner started. The nothing is not absence. It's the mind learning to be quiet enough to hear. That learning takes time, and it takes more than 1 or 2 sessions to develop. The best practitioners in the Stargate archive, the people whose session transcripts are genuinely remarkable, got there through hundreds of sessions, consistent practice, and the willingness to be wrong about their own impressions repeatedly. What I'd ask you to bring to this module is the same quality of attention the protocol itself is training. A willingness to be present with what is happening before judgment rushes in to tell you what it means. That applies to your sessions. It also applies to this course. You're here because something in you is willing to follow a question seriously. That matters. Module 3 covers the felt quality of genuine signal, how to recognize and work with analytical overlay, the specific errors that show up most commonly in early practice, and the discipline of phenomenological journaling. Keeping a record of how impressions feel before you know whether they're accurate so that you can learn from the comparison. It closes with a community discussion prompt on the Great Work platform, where you'll have the chance to share what you experienced in your practice sessions and to read what others encountered. That community record, over time, becomes one of the most valuable resources in this course, a diverse account of what this practice genuinely feels like across many different people, not just the idealized description from the textbook. Module 4, which follows, will take up the theoretical question that the first 3 modules leave open. Why does this work when it works? We'll examine 4 of the most rigorous frameworks currently available: quantum non-locality, Swan's signal line model, retrocausation, and the sidereal time correlation. None of them settles the question. All of them deepen it in interesting ways. For now, take a breath. You've already done more than most people do with this material. You will have sat down with a coordinate and tried. That willingness to engage, to be present with something uncertain and strange and not yet understood, is not a small thing. The work in this module is inner work. It asks you to attend to your own perception with honesty and patience. I'd say that's not unrelated to everything else we're building here on the Great Work platform. The same quality of attention turned toward a different practice. Take your time with what follows. Read carefully. Bring your Module 2 session record alongside you as a reference point. And when you sit down for your Module 3 practice session, notice not only what arrives, but how. That's where the real work is.